Championship weekend is upon us. We are still talking DFS. All coming up next on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Happy Friday morning, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday DFS version. I am Scott Jenstad, joined as always on Friday mornings by Ryan Belongia. He even joined me after the Niners-Packers game, which is very good of him, very gracious of him. If you could please rate and review the podcast, we do appreciate that. Helps everybody find us, etc. Ryan, how are you?
Yeah, no, I'm good. Even though the Packers lost and your 49ers won, I think maybe I still had a more enjoyable Saturday night than you did watching that game. It was the Packers looked great for the most part. Jordan Love looked great. Looked like they were going to win most of the game. I was going into it with no expectations. So
yeah,
it's part of the reason why I'm not that disappointed.
They're so young. Great run. You found your quarterback for sure. I feel like the Packers should have won that game. Like I might be just like being negative and biased, but like I think the Niners played poorly on both sides. They played badly on special teams also, and like a couple things here and there. And like the Packers outplayed them for probably the first like 50 minutes of that game. I know the Niners ended up with almost same time possession and more yards, but like kind of catching up. And Love made a couple mistakes in the fourth quarter. Young quarterback stuff. He missed Aaron Jones open. He hit Musgrave. Bad pass, got intercepted. And then obviously the play at the end. Like you probably shouldn't do that in first down, but 50 seconds left. Like, how much are you going to really critique a guy for trying to make a crazy play? And in his mind, I'm sure he's probably like, this is a chance. And like, Greenlaw probably picks that. I don't know, 1 out of 3 times, like diving linebacker. But the Packers gave the Niners everything they could want. I think that we've got a long-term discussion on whether Brock Purdy can throw the ball if it's raining, which is problematic. Although it's supposed to be sunny this weekend. I'm looking outside like I'm here. There's like 6 hours away, but it was a heck of an effort. We had some fun games like Bills Chiefs. Like that game delivers every single time those teams play.
Yeah, I feel bad for Josh Allen. That game was awesome though. Mahomes played great. That throw by Allen at the end. If only Diggs could have caught it, it was basically the best throw you could have made.
Like, it's funny. You watch that highlight, and you're like, he threw that ball like 65 yards in the air and hit Diggs right in the head. Like, it couldn't have been a better pass, and he chucked the head. I can't believe how far that ball went.
Yeah, it was tough. I was rooting for the Bills, and I had some Bills futures and Bills in best ball, so it would have been really nice if they won. Like, I advanced a couple really good teams in best ball, but they're Bill stacked, so they're dead now. But anyways, it felt like KC was just going to win the game. I don't know. Mahomes played really well. And it felt like Buffalo was just always playing catch up and needing a play here and there where like KC was more comfortable, even though they didn't have nearly as many plays or time of possession, but I don't know. They were really efficient. I was impressed with KC.
Yeah, I was too. And like their defensive adjustments at halftime, like every week, like their numbers in the second half on defense the whole season are impressive. Like Buffalo was smoking them on the run the first half of that game, and then they just kind of closed that door. And you're right, Buffalo's always playing catch up, and they should have been like playing more catch up. If McCole Hardman doesn't fumble on the 1 yard line, that game's probably over a lot earlier. That game that added a lot of the drama of the game. Like I was kind of rooting for Buffalo too, just because I'd like to see them get over the top. And Kansas City wins every year. Like nothing against anybody, but it takes Casey's there every single year. It would have been fun to see Buffalo make it, but like that play definitely ramped up the drama, made the game a lot more fun to watch. Probably not for Chiefs fans. Must have been frustrating to have a chance to kind of ice the game there. And Hardman, who has had a rough playoffs, but he's been active, but had a rough playoffs. But yeah, it was a fun game. The Ravens Texans game was kind of blah. I thought Lions Buccaneers kind of blah too. Like I know it was tied at halftime, but I never really felt like Tampa Bay really had that much of a chance. And once Detroit got up 2 touchdowns, it just left the internet to complain about Detroit or Tampa Bay going for 2 after they scored on the touchdown, even though it is the right play. But a lot of people complain about that. But it was a fun weekend. And then I think that Bills Chiefs being such a great game kind of made it seem like the games were really good when you wrap them up.
Yeah, I agree. Better, I think Lamar, like the game last weekend, 10-10 at half, but it didn't feel like the Ravens were ever in trouble. The defense was amazing. Houston only scored on that long punt return, and the second half was just sort of comfortable. So the Ravens-Chiefs is really interesting this week.
What a freaking awesome game. Like, you could Niners fan aside, you could argue these are the two best teams. I probably argue that the Niners maybe are between them, and I'd call the Ravens the best team. But Ravens Chiefs, on AFC Championship game in Baltimore, I think it's been, I forget the amount of years, but it's been a long time since Baltimore hosted an AFC Championship game. I was surprised how long it's been. I guess the times it was a Super Bowl, they won on the road. They got everybody coming out. Everybody's ever been good for the Ravens. They're doing some kind of ceremony. They got people doing national anthem, first toss. They got I even saw Todd Heap was out there. I hadn't seen that name in 15 years. But they're going all out. It's going to be an awesome game. Let's talk about the games. We're here to talk DFS though. Obviously people are still playing. There's 2 games. There's big contests on DraftKings and Fanduel. Chiefs Ravens, you mentioned it. It's the early game. It's noon Pacific, 3:00 Eastern. Ravens favored by 3.5 to 4, depending on where you see it. The total in this game is 44.5, so about a touchdown less than the NFC game. Where do you see Chiefs Ravens going? If you got to pick a game, you got to figure out how this game flow goes. What do you think in how this game kind of plays out?
As far as I kind of agree with the total. It feels like a grinded out 24-21 type game. I don't think if either team gets the lead, they're not going to play fast and air it out. And, both teams, Lamar's not going to throw that much. Same with Mahomes. I mean, it's similar teams, really good defenses. I think for DFS, people are just going to go to the San Fran Detroit game. Just so you mentioned, it has a touchdown higher total and just players on each side that project so much better. It's tough with Baltimore and KC. You got Lamar, but then similar to last week, none of his pass catchers did anything. So it was just naked Lamar Jackson. And then KC.
It's hard to score 4 touchdowns without anybody else doing anything. That's what he did. It was wild. He had 2 running and 2 passing, but you're right. He just nobody on his team had more than 4 catches.
And I would expect that again. Now you got Andrews back. You figure, he's probably going to be back. I mean, it's not for sure, but it seems like it.
I think as of this morning, they put him on the 53-man roster. I think it's actually official now.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. So I don't know. We don't know how much, he's going to play. Likely he's going to play. It'll probably be somewhat even, I would guess. Maybe Andrews plays a little bit more, but, they have 4 receivers now, too, who are kind of all, don't expect any of them to get that many targets. Just they don't throw that much to begin with. KC, I have, some questions for you about specific players. I think some of the most important questions are Travis Kelce versus Rashee Rice because they're the same price. And then evaluating Kelce and Rice versus Pacheco because they're the same price. Is it, what do you want to target, I guess, in that game?
I mean, it's hard because this Baltimore defense is I don't want to just call them, they're elite for this season for sure. The question is how elite are they historically? You look at stats and DVOA and Baltimore's I think it was before the playoffs, a top 5 team ever by DVOA. That combines offense and defense too. But you watch their linebackers and I just noticed this, and I kind of focused after the Niners lost to them, and Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen are just insanely good. I think people always talk about D-line or secondaries, and linebackers kind of get lost a little bit. That's changed a little bit this year with them and the Niners having really good linebackers. But man, those guys are everywhere. They stop the run. They stop the pass over the middle. It's really tough. My thought is that I think Baltimore is the better team here. I think Baltimore gets in the lead. So I prefer the pass catchers on Kansas City. Just think that's the way the game script's going to work out. With 2 games, you kind of have to work out in your head how you think the game works out. If it doesn't, you're going to lose. It's just one of those things. A normal stretch, or a normal slate, you can kind of figure out, I know this game's going to have some points. There's only 2 games. You can't only play Niners and Lions players. You're going to want some guys from both games. But for me, it's pass catchers. And for me, I think it's Rashee Rice this week. I know it was Kelce last week. I like Rice a little bit more on the outside this week than I do Kelce, kind of over in the middle with Smith and Queen. The linebackers are kind of where I shift there. I know that Baltimore's secondary is good too. Kyle Hamilton's a stud. They're just good everywhere. But with 2 games, you're gonna have to try and pick on something. My thought is to go to Rice kind of based on the theory of how I think the game goes and how I think Baltimore's defense sets up.
Yeah, it's so tough because Baltimore's defense is so good, right?
They're good everywhere.
Kelce, right. Like Kelce might have a tough time, but also Rice too. It looks like they're going to get Marlon Humphrey back, but also what is it? Kyle Hamilton, is that who?
Yeah, he's the safety.
And he defends the slot a lot, where Rice has been lining up quite a bit. So I mean, it's a tough matchup all around.
They killed Houston's offense. Like Houston's offense didn't score a touchdown last week.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe, it's tough all around. You just Pacheco, Rice, and Kelce are all going to be popular just because it's a 2-game slate and there's not that many other options. So you got to decide what to do there. And maybe you fade. You could fade them all, to be honest.
Yep. I mean, someone's going to score in this game, though. So you probably have to get the person that scores the touchdown, I guess, is kind of what you get to. But you look at the Ravens against Stroud last week. I mean, Stroud was rolling, beating a lot of teams. 19-33 for $175, 5.3 YPA, no touchdowns. Like and Nico Collins had 68 yards, and he'd been rolling. The best Texans rusher, Devin Singletary, had 22 yards. Like they're a nasty, like all-time nasty defense. All times maybe a bit strong, but like they're up there in terms of nasty defense. And the next 2 weeks will determine, next 2 games will determine, how historical they are. But they're just really good. But so is Patrick Mahomes. I think that if anybody's doubted them, I think mid-season a lot of people are like, oh, the Chiefs are finally done. They got no chance. Like I think you just can't doubt anybody that has any team that has him on the team. He only threw 23 times last week, but 17-23, 9.3 YPA, 215 yards. Like you said it before he plays away. That dude is just unbelievable. You cannot count on any team that he's playing for.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. And then, like you said, so many people said the Chiefs were dead. So many people wrote them off. They went into Buffalo. They hadn't played on the road in the postseason. He did that. Or Mahomes went in there and won in Buffalo. If he does it in Baltimore here and they get to the Super Bowl, I mean, you pretty much can't argue this guy's greatness. So, I wouldn't put it past him. From a DFS perspective, we've talked about it all season, and you look at his numbers, he just doesn't score over 20 fantasy points very often, at least not this year. And, the Chiefs offense has sort of struggled for most of the season. They've looked better the last couple weeks, but, matchup is maybe as tough as it gets. So
as a fan, though, like it's just a football fan watching the game, it's awesome. Like I'm so curious to see what he can do with, I think it's fair to call him limited weapons. Like Rice and Kelce and Pacheco are all good, but like he doesn't have a whole stable of stud receivers. I think it's a fascinating matchup. Like, can he actually do something against the defense? I think Baltimore wins this game, but I've learned that I'll never say for sure. I learned to not doubt Mahomes at all. But it is a really fascinating matchup to see what Reed and Mahomes can figure out against the defense, because it looks almost impossible to figure out fully.
Yeah, I mean, we're on the same page. I agree with everything you just said. Like, if I had to pick, if I had to guess, I could see like a 24-17 or something, Ravens, that type of game.
Yeah. And so the NFC game, obviously it opens up a little bit. We've got the Niners are favored by 7, 7.5 in some places. I was a little surprised by that, but I mean, I guess that, you can't just factor in last week. You got to factor in, how they played all season and stats and numbers. Deebo Samuel is questionable right now. It is very clear. We talked about last week. It is very clear that Deebo was going to be a massive part of that game plan last week. Like, I think he touched the ball on 2 of the first 3 plays, and they just kind of couldn't figure out what their game plan was after he went out, which is weird because I think Shanahan is an unbelievably good coach, but it's weird that you don't have a contingency in football when someone gets hurt. Like, it just kind of they ran and they had the run to Juwan Jennings that made no sense. They made it was a mistake later. They were supposed to be Deebo in there, but he was hurt. It's weird. Like, they just kind of fell apart. He's so important to them, especially in these big kind of grinded out games. I think they were planning on he was probably going to get 8 carries in that game. Like, I think he was going to be him and McCaffrey carrying the ball a ton, and just kind of went away from it. And Green Bay was smart. Green Bay lined up in base a lot, knowing that they were like, well, let's see if Purdy can throw the ball in the rain, and he couldn't. Like, Niners kill base defense normally. Like, if you try to stop the run, Shanahan and Purdy and the receivers will light you up, and it didn't happen last week because he couldn't throw the ball accurately. Over and under this game is 51.5. I think the story here is, how successful will the Lions' run be against the Niners? The Niners' run D we talked about last week is struggling. Lived up to that last week. I know they kind of slowed Aaron Jones down a little bit in the middle of the game. Like, he was at 3-something yards a carry, and then he hit the 53-yarder. But it's very clear they were hitting some gash plays, they were hitting some big plays. They hit that big play, which obviously, Chase Young got smoked on the edge. He hasn't done a lot since the Niners signed him. The run D is the most important thing here because Montgomery and Gibbs are going to run the ball, and I assume that's the game plan this week.
Yeah, for sure. That Debo injury was really tilting. You talked me onto him last week, and I think you were exactly right. Like you said, he got 2 touches.
Sorry
right
about
away.
that, but yeah, I think it was the right play.
No. It was clearly the right play. I played him in high stakes, and he was low owned, like really low owned. Yeah, it looked like he was going to be a focal point. Yeah, it was looking really good, and then the Niners really struggled without him. It seems like he's going to play here. I find it interesting that, the Niners, they were in a tough spot last week, needed that game so bad, and Debo's just comes out in street clothes, and now all of a sudden he can play just like a week later, but he couldn't tough it out. It's worrying. It's worrying. Like he's clearly not healthy.
I think their concern was that the fact that he had fractured it earlier in the year. And I think that their concern was he fractured it again. So they're like, well, we can't, if he fractured it, he can't play. But once he got the x-rays and everything done, he didn't fracture it. So maybe now he can tough it out, as you say. Like,
that makes sense.
I think if it was like a new thing or they knew it wasn't broken, I think that he would have gone back out there. I think that, he went in the locker room and came back and then he was running around. But I think it was the fact that he did that in Cleveland. And like, I don't think they knew right away. And they found out he fractured it after. So I think that I think they probably thought he did, would be my guess. Because I think it sounded like they just took away his pads from him and wouldn't let him play. So I don't think it was a Debo issue. I think it was more a team, trying to make the best decision for him there. But 51.5 in a total is a big total in a championship game. The weather's supposed to be nice. It's actually supposed to be like 70 degrees in Santa Clara, which is really warm for this time of year. Supposed to not rain. We talked about last week. The Purdy throwing the ball in the rain thing is a real problem. It is not a problem for this week. It's not a problem for the Super Bowl if they make it. But it's a problem when you're thinking about, are we signing this guy for a gigantic contract? Like, if he goes to the playoffs in the rain, are we just automatically going to lose? Because he, before last drive last week, was legit bad. Missed a lot of open guys.
Yeah, and almost gave the game away if he thought that interception that should have been.
That was pick 6 too.
Yeah, that was probably the game. I think that as far as the total goes, like you said, it's on the Lions to get it there.
Do you think they can score? I guess I just kind of go back to the question. Do you think they can score?
Like you said, I think the run. Can the 49ers stop the run? I guess is the key. Goff. I don't know. I think Goff has, for the most part, impressed me this season. He's had a couple rough stretches and a couple tough games, but yeah, I don't know. They seem to be playing with a lot of confidence. The Packers scored on them. Why can't? Yeah, I think the Lions do score. I don't know. Like, I kind of agree with the total. I think the Lions hang in there.
I actually think it goes over the total.
Okay, nice.
I'm weirdly hesitant based on last week, but I think the Niners should score a lot of points in this game. I don't think Detroit can stop them. I think that if they try and stop the run, which I think they'll try and do, I think the Niners receivers and Kittle would light them up. I don't think they can stop the pass. They do stop the run well, but it's because they kind of focus on it and try to do that. And they've been beating the pass all year long. You look at a lot of their stats; they're the worst team in the NFL against play action, against the pass, and obviously against the pass play action. The Niners are really good at that. I think if McCaffrey has any success at all, they're just going to have a lot of trouble stopping the play action. But I'm worried about the Niners stopping them. The Packers clearly picked on Ambry Thomas last week, and it worked. They got some pass interference. They got some catches. I think that Detroit will try and move some guys around because Charvarius Ward's really, really good. I don't think there's any way they'll let him. The Detroit will let him just cover Amon-Ra. So, but Reynolds is there. Jameis Williams there. I think both those guys have a chance to hit big plays. This Niners D, they're going to give up some big plays when Ambry Thomas is on somebody to lose somebody in coverage. And I think Montgomery and especially Gibbs. I think Gibbs is the guy that is scary as hell to me as a Niners fan. You look at some of the plays Jones made. If Gibbs gets those kind of lanes, he's going to bust one. He's going to be gone. I mean, Jones hit a 53-yarder. Gibbs will do the same. I think we're looking at a 35-30 kind of game here. I think both offenses are going to have a lot of success.
Okay, well
but then you got Goff outdoors, Goff in a big spot, Goff against a team that struggles against any quarterback that can move at all, and Goff can't move at all. The Niners have killed Jared Goff over the years. Killed So that's the one little thing in my head. But I think with Ben Johnson, Colin plays, I think the Lions are going to score.
Okay. Well, you ease some of my concerns about Debo too. And if the game does go like that, I mean, for DFS, you're just going to want to stack it. I mean, the players in that game are going to be popular, but if that game scores 55 points and the other one scores 40, just especially with some of the prices on both sides, I want to have a lot more exposure to the Niners-Lions game.
So let's get into the players and the lineups and the DFS prices. But first, a note from our sponsors at Circa. Get ready for ultimate big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sunday is in Las Vegas this year. Watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. Massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects throughout the game. Snag the best seats in the sun with day beds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. Or you can touch down at the world's largest sportsbook, Circa Sports, for the big game bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. Don't miss these legendary viewing experiences on February 11th. The big game parties only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve today at circalasvegas.com. So, Ryan, we're going to do this pretty quick. We only got 2 games. We've kind of broken down how we think the games go already. But quarterback, there's only 4 of them. Lamar is 7,700, Mahomes 6,900, Purdy 6,400, Goff 6,300. Is Brock going to be as high percentage on this slate as I think he's going to be?
Yeah, definitely. He'll be the most popular for sure. Might even get up to like 50% in some contests. He's underpriced again. We talked about it last week. But I don't know. Look what happened last week. Ended up as the worst play. 15 Draftkings points only. So like that could happen again if you want to fade him just from a game theory point of view. Here's what's interesting is if Debo plays, so I want to play Purdy. I think it's a great play. I agree with you in this spot that the Niners score a bunch of points. If Debo plays, it makes them really hard too because he's expensive. It's tough to click Debo. It's just hard to see him have a ceiling game coming off that injury. But he also takes a little away from Ayuk, takes a little away from Kittle. And then on the other side of that game, you got Amon-Ra, who, despite the tough matchup, clearly looks like the best wide receiver on the slate. And with Debo in there, it just makes me want to play Amon-Ra more. And what I'm getting at is no one's going to play Goff on this slate. He's going to be the least popular of all 4 quarterbacks. And his receivers, I mentioned Amon-Ra, but you mentioned Reynolds and Jameson Williams before. They're 2 of the better punt options on this slate. Gibbs is one of the best running backs on this slate who also catches passes, and no one's really going to play the quarterback. So, I don't know. Like for tournaments, I think Goff is kind of interesting to pair with some of those guys. And obviously, you're going to play CMC. I know I didn't mention Lamar. Lamar, he crushed last week. He was under-owned. He was like 10%, 15%. Smashed. I mean, 100 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. He was in
every winning lineup I looked at. Like every winning lineup. It was Lamar. I was like, oh, that makes sense. And it was like the first game too. You're like, Lamar, you're pretty much dead.
Yeah, and then this week, I think he'll be the 2nd most popular. I don't know, Scott. What are you going to do at quarterback?
I think I'm going to play the 2 guys in the NFC game and kind of go lineups there. I mean, it's tough because the Kansas City pass D is so good, and the Ravens pass catchers, while there are a bunch of them, there's nobody I love Zay Flowers, but there's nobody I'm like, oh, I got to play that. I mean, you can see KC kind of, with Snead and McDuffie, they're going to be on those guys, and I think Lamar just spreads it around, which makes it hard to pick anybody. So I think you just play, if you're going to play Lamar, I think you just kind of play him, maybe pick one receiver and figure out who you like. But I mean, I just think that Purdy and Goff in the high scoring game. The interesting thing with the Lions, you mentioned how hard it is to pick which Niners got to play, and it's the way it is. They've got so many options. But you look at Detroit, and you mentioned the punt options, but they had 42 targets last week. So I think they had 1 sack, but they had 42 targets last week. 25 of them went to St. Brown and Laporta. It was very clear. It was a very narrow passing window last week. And then that includes 4 for Gibbs too. So, and 3 for Montgomery. So that's 7 that went to other guys. So James Williams had 4 targets. Josh Reynolds had 3. Brock Wright had that 1 big catch. Jason Kabinda, I think he must be the backup tight end, had 1. But my point is it's Amon-Ra and Laporta. Like you can pretty much guarantee like those guys are going to get a ton of targets every week. He's going to get a ton of targets. You can play some punts, but I think Goff is really easy. You just play him with probably both of those guys in a 2-game slate. I think it's a lot easier to figure out to play Goff, but I think that their goal is probably to run the ball, so that's a little scary if you're playing Goff or DFS.
Yeah, that's their goal, but I think it's the odds say that they're likely to be playing from behind.
Yeah, Niners could score their first 2 drives, and that the run the ball thing doesn't go fully out the window. But Goff's throwing the ball 40 times. I mean, they led all the second half last week, and Goff threw the ball 43 times last week still.
Yeah, and part of it is sort of just process of elimination, in that like we didn't want to play Mahomes on full. Would you play Mahomes on a full slate in this matchup against Baltimore? We mentioned he hasn't scored 20 fantasy points. Like,
no way, right? Like the
just
only reason you consider
absolutely never.
The only reason you consider this week is he's going to be low owned and he's Patrick Mahomes, and there's only 4 guys.
Yeah.
But no way on a regular slate would you play him against Baltimore.
Right, and I guess almost the argument, like, since there's only 4 quarterbacks on the slate, like, could 22 points be the high score? Sure. Then like it seems tough for that to happen, but yeah, I don't know. My point is, like, I'm just drawn to that other game. There's going to be so many more passing attempts, you feel like, and just it's such a tough spot for Lamar. It's such a tough spot for Mahomes. It just doesn't seem like there's a ceiling there. Like, Lamar's going to have to run for 100 yards again.
Yeah, which is certainly in play. But yeah, I mean, I have a hard time seeing him like throw for a ton of yards. Like, I think he'll make some plays. They'll have a couple big plays. They'll have some chunk plays, but like consistently making passes against that Kansas City D, when you're Lamar, like that's not totally what you do. It's hard to see him. Like, I think if he throws for like 180 yards, like that seems about right. Like, I don't, maybe low 200s, but it's like, you can't. It's very hard to figure out a way that he throws the ball for 330 yards unless they get behind 20 early or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. You said it. Chiefs have one of the best pass defenses in the league. It's just it's a really tough spot. Like, you almost don't want to overthink it. The quarterbacks in the other game are just much better plays.
Yeah, I think the ways that I get different and find some other plays are probably not at quarterback. I think I'm just going to play the NFC guys too.
Yeah, I think me too. Just the less if I played Lamar, I think you kind of touch on, like, maybe I would play him with just like, you can play him naked, like we mentioned, just because he spreads it around so much, and so much of his upside is from running and rushing touchdowns. But you could pair him with like Bateman for 3,600. A guy that doesn't need a lot of, or Aguilar for 30, like a guy who just needs 3 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown. So like, I would do something like that. Yeah,
I'd play him with someone just because in a 2-game slate, like, you're going to want to hit whoever he scores the touchdown to. But you're right; it could be. You can even play. You play with one of the tight ends. So you play with Likely. Like I think Likely's still going to play a lot. I know Andrews is going to be back, but I mean, Likely had a touchdown last week. He's been really good since Andrews was hurt. I don't think he's going to be fully out of the game plan. But you're right. I mean, Bateman had 3 for 39 last week. Aguilar had the touchdown. Beckham didn't do anything last week. You could kind of figure it out there, but I think I play with one of them, and just kind of you're hoping you get the when they get the ball inside the 20, you're hoping you get the touchdown pass. Right. Running back is as it was last week. It's Christian McCaffrey, then a large glut of guys in the mid range. But McCaffrey is 9,000 on DraftKings this week. Do you just play him? What do you do here? I mean, obviously some lineups where you don't. If you want to go like Purdy and receivers, maybe you get away from him. But even in the game last week, the offense wasn't firing. He still scored twice. He still was super valuable in any format. But I guess the theory is: are you just playing him this week? Are there lineups you're not going to play him? How do you kind of work out the? It kind of comes again to McCaffrey or not McCaffrey.
Yeah, I think I'm playing him. I mean, I guess really the only reason you wouldn't is because he's going to be so popular, like clearly the most popular player on the slate this week. Yep. But I mean, it makes sense. The rest of the running backs just aren't that great. And McCaffrey's sort of underpriced again. You said like you could fade him and play 49ers receivers and Amon-Ra. Like if you want to, you're going to need a lot of those expensive guys at the other positions to have ceiling games like Kelsey.
And you just hope McCaffrey doesn't score and has like 85 total yards and doesn't score, something like that. But
it's a good tournament strategy because when McCaffrey scores like 20 points, or even the few times he only scores like 15 points, like you have such a good chance to win because everybody's going to play him. But like in single entry stuff and 3 max, 5 max, like I'm probably just going to play him because you go down the list and Pacheco projects as the second best running back. It seems like he's going to be the second most popular after McCaffrey. You sort of mentioned at the start, I think, it didn't seem like you're in love with him here. It's a really tough spot for Pacheco. I think I would fade him at, high ownership on this slate. I get it. He's probably the second best option just because of how good he's been and the usage. And he's clearly going to be, or he's going to see more touches than the Lions backs and the Ravens backs. I mean, he's got like 7 touchdowns in his last 6 games. He's looked the part, but yeah, it's just a really tough matchup. So I'm tempted to just play McCaffrey and then fade Pacheco, I think. I don't know. How do you look at it?
Is McCaffrey, I'm bad at percentages. Is McCaffrey like a 65% owned or something in tournaments?
I think maybe like 75%.
Oh, he's even more then. I mean, that's just, it's one of those things. Like if you want to play a strategy, but if he does well and you don't play him, like your lineup's pretty much dead before it starts. So that's hard to do. And you look at you mentioned he's 9,000, he's 11,000 on FanDuel. Like it is a crazy price over there. And then the next guy is 7,800. I really like.
I think on FanDuel you could fade him. On FanDuel you could fade him.
I like Jahmyr Gibbs a lot this week. I think that he is the exact type of guy that Niners are going to struggle with. I think that they're going to probably figure out how to kind of slow down Montgomery, kind of the runs up the middle. And Montgomery's going to have to score, I think, to work out well. But, with Armstead back, Hargrave in the middle, I think the edges are more my concern with the Niners rush D. And, man, if Gibbs get any of those holes, like you see, Warner and Greenlaw are going to have to be really ready for him because he's going to get some plays where, Young doesn't set the edge. They're missing Cleveland Farrell, who was kind of their better run edge defender, opposite Bosa. So you got Chase Young in there. They were moving a lot of guys in now there. Randy Gregory played some too, and Joseph Day played. I just think Gibbs is going to have a chance for a couple of big plays, and those are not going to be big plays that go for 10 yards. They're going to go for 30 yards. And if those are anywhere in the right place of the field, I think Gibbs is the guy that scares me the most as a Niners fan. And at 6,400 on DraftKings, I think he's 7,000 on FanDuel. He's my second favorite running back by a pretty decent margin, I think.
Yep, me too. Couldn't have said it better, really. The script I'm playing for is 49ers get a lead, Lions play catch up. Gibbs is going to be in there, catching dump offs, not just dump offs, everything. Just in there, more touches. Yeah. You mentioned he's so explosive. Just get him the ball and he can produce. Yeah, I really like Gibbs this week.
Yeah, I do too. I liked Montgomery last week. Didn't really work out well, but the game scripts are different. I think that, like we said before, the 2-game slate, you kind of have to predict how the game's going to go. Own it, live with it. If it works out really well, that's great. If it doesn't, you're probably dead anyway. In a 2-game slate, like you just have to kind of figure out and just lean into everything you think is going to happen because there's no, there's no like 13 games where like, if I'm wrong here, I'm right here. I can just skip that game. Can't do that here. What about some of the cheaper running backs? If you were trying to get a little different, maybe you want to play, McCaffrey, Amon-Ra, Kelsey, Rice, something like that. Anybody down here? Montgomery's 5,600, Gus Edwards 5,500, Justice Hill, who had more carries than Edwards. I think it actually looked better too. He ran the ball really well last week. I think he was 11 or 13 for 66, 5.1 yards per carry last week. He's 4,800. I think it's clear that Dalvin Cook did get carries. He had 8 carries in that game, but he looked like Dalvin Cook of the Jets or the late Vikings too. But he's 4,200. If I was going to go cheap down here, I think for me it's Justice Hill. 13 carries last week. Mentioned he also had 2 targets. He had 10 targets the week before. We talked about that. I guess it'd be 2 weeks before, but the last time the Ravens played. I think Hill is mildly intriguing there at 4,800. Of the guys down here, he would be the one I'm most likely to go to if I'm going to try to save some money here and play everybody up everywhere else.
Yep. And I just have to agree with you again. I think perfect breakdown. I have quite a bit of interest in Hill. I think he'll end up pretty popular because I think other people see this too. And
yeah, I don't think I'm the only one that noticed he led them in carries last week.
Yeah, and if it's just price as well. Like if you want to play McCaffrey and St. Brown, Hill, makes that a lot easier. You mentioned he's actually looked pretty good. He's got something about him. He's got some burst. He can make people miss. He's running hard. Like, I don't know. You just on podcasts and stuff, you just hear Justice Hill isn't any good. But I don't know. The last couple weeks I've seen him out there, he looks decent enough to me. You mentioned the targets too against the Dolphins, and he's played more He played more than Gus Edwards in both of those games. 57% of snaps last week to lead the Ravens, only 34% for Gus Edwards. It was pretty much the same against the Dolphins, 54% for Justice Hill and 33% for Gus Edwards. Now, Gus will probably still be in there. He still has those games where, they get it inside the 5 and he'll run a couple touchdowns in. But yeah, I like Justice Hill here. He just makes sense.
And we talked about it the last couple of weeks, like the way to beat this KCD is still running the ball. I know that Buffalo has Josh Allen. I do get that. So when these stats are a little bit not just running back, but they were 39 for 182 last week. Buffalo was running the ball. Like I know that KC was better in the second half, but that's 4.7 yards per carry. Like Ty Johnson was 7 for 40 last week for the Bills. I know that Cook did not have a high yards per carry. He kind of slowed down, but Allen had 72 yards rushing, 6 yards per carry. The way to beat the Chiefs is to run the ball. And I think that Buffalo did it early and kind of went away from it. They kind of got stopped. Baltimore ain't going away from it.
Nope, I agree. And I think part of it is just there's some scenarios where like Pacheco scores 10 or 12 points like quite often here. And like even if Justice Hill gets you 7 or 8, like that's a win, like because of what you're going to be able to do with the rest of your lineup. So yeah, I just think he makes sense if you want to play McCaffrey and St. Brown and maybe spend up at tight end.
Yeah, I'm really curious how popular he'll be because I really like him as a play this week, but 4,800 is so cheap that I have to imagine you mentioned people will go there. It'll be interesting to see if he's like
I think he'll probably be third. I think it'll go, or he'll be like right around the same as Gibbs. I think it'll be like McCaffrey, Pacheco, and then Gibbs and Justice Hill. But yeah.
That's not too bad. I think that it's not like a week where like it's free square everybody's playing the guy because I think that's enough.
Right.
Gus Edwards there. Lamar's obviously going to get a ton of carries too, so it's not going to be like they're going to hand the ball Justice Hill 22 times. But I don't know. He had 15 touches last week. 15 touches last week. You give me that, I take that at the price and like walk away very happy. I mean, whatever happens.
Oh, absolutely.
15 touches would be a huge win.
It's only a 2-game slate, so like the ownerships are gonna seem high, but like everyone's kind of high. There's just not that many options. So it's not like he's gonna be massive chalk.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 2-game slate. You got to hit on pretty much everything, all the touchdowns, most of the touchdowns to win. So it's just kind of the way it is. Let's talk about pass catchers. First note from our sponsors at Fanduel. Tackle millions in prizes all playoffs long in Fanduel fantasy contests. If you're new to fantasy, there's no better time to get in on the action because right now new customers get a 100% deposit match up to $100. Playing fantasy for huge cash prizes on Fanduel is fun and exciting. Just draft your lineup and watch your team move up the leaderboard. We talked before how, running back's really interesting at Fanduel. McCaffrey's 11,000. Maybe he becomes more of a fade there than he does on other sites. Plus on Fanduel, you can choose from full slate contests featuring multiple games, single game contests, season-long best ball contests, beginner-only contests, which are great for learning ropes and more. And when you win, you get paid instantly. So kick off football playoff season with a 100% deposit match up to $100. Go to FanDuel.com and start playing for huge cash prizes today. So we got, again, only 2 games. We've kind of talked about some of the receivers and pass catchers already, but we've got 2 above 7,000. You have Amon-Ra at 7,900, Debo's at 7,300, and then you've got kind of a mid-range of Ayuk at 6,900, Rashee Rice at 6,500, and Zay Flowers at 5,800. It's interesting in that we've got 2 games here where not many of these teams have like 2 receivers that are in this range. Like, we've talked all year about Hill and Waddle or Godwin and Evans, whatever it may be. We've got Debo and Ayuk here, but like the other ones, like the Lions, like clearly it's Amon-Ra. Rice is clear the guy in KC. Flowers is probably the guy in Baltimore, but less so than the other ones. What do you do here? I find it hard to click Debo. I think you said earlier, like I just worry that he catches one pass or catches a pass in the second quarter and hits that shoulder and it's done. Like, I think that's a very real possibility, but that probably makes him, maybe a tournament play because he's lower owned than he would be normally. But the way the matchups work out this week, I love Ayuk to get fed this week. I think they're going to line him up and get some good matchups, and I think he's going to make some big plays this week.
I hope you're right. I kind of agree. It's tough for me to click Debo. I just can't do it. I'm not sure there's a ceiling there. Maybe he can score 2 touchdowns to get you there, but it feels like that's how he would have to do it. And
the risk of him making playing 8 plays is real too.
Yeah, and even just sort of being a decoy for some of the game. Not a decoy, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. Not handing the ball 8 times to get big hits up the middle. Sort of thing. Yeah.
Right. Stuff like that. So I think like you said, like each of these, they sort of just have one guy. St. Brown, Rashee Rice, and Ayuk, I think they'll be the most popular up top. I think people will feel the same way as us and just won't click Debo. I really like St. Brown in this range. I really like Ayuk. Try to play them together if I can on some lineups. Probably just won't play Debo. I don't know. It's kind of cut and dry. I don't know. I guess it's only Friday, but I expected Amon-Ra to be a little bit more popular than I'm seeing. Like I see Rashee Rice and Ayuk expect to be more popular. Maybe that happens just because they're cheaper. But I don't know. Like St. Brown's a priority for me this week.
Yeah, I mean, he had 14 targets last week. There's not many game scripts you can come up with where he's not really involved. I think which is the key to that. If they get behind, he's going to be fed with targets. If they get ahead, it's probably because Amon-Ra did something. And I think they'll still have him involved. I think they'll try and run the ball. We talked about the fact that they'll run the ball, but their passing tree is so narrow that, while Reynolds and Jameson Williams are there to hit some big plays, maybe, Amon-Ra is the guy that Goff relies on. And it's a close game, he's hitting Amon-Ra in the fourth quarter. Like, it's just, there's not many paths where he's not super involved, and obviously he's really, really good. You get involved plus good, and you just get a ton of targets there. What do you feel about Rice and Flowers? Like we talked about this, we're trying to find the right plays from this game. There are going to be some right plays from the Kansas City Baltimore game. I know that you can't fully fade it in 2-game slate. You want to find the right guys. Where do you fall on the two main pass catchers here in Rashee Rice and Zay Flowers?
Yeah, I think it's part of the reason why I like St. Brown. In that I'm okay being off these guys, and you got to spend money somewhere. With Rice, it's mostly an ownership thing. Like I see him, he's going to be very popular, and I think it's such a tough matchup.
Yeah.
I mean, it is such a tough matchup. Marlon Humphrey's going to be back. Kyle Hamilton. Yeah, I think he struggles here. Just like I don't think there's a lot of points and receptions and yards to be had necessarily. So yeah, and then Zay Flowers, played a lot of Zay Flowers last week, and it was disappointing. I think now with Andrews back, we mentioned at the start, it's going to be tough for him to see a lot of volume as well. So it pushes me to punt instead, like to play Amon-Ra and then punt a spot instead of one of those guys. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I mean, I think that makes sense. I think I like Rice a little more than you do because I think Baltimore's going to be up in this game. I do think that they're the better team, and I think Casey's going to have to be forced to pass the ball in the second half, and maybe it may not be efficient, but I think he's going to get there in terms of getting a lot of targets. So I don't think it'll be quite like last week where they should have the ball a lot last week. It was really weird. Like Buffalo had the ball so much in that game. Mahomes is efficient, but the volume wasn't there. I think the volume is going to be a little more ramped up this week, so I think they're going to need it. I think that they're going to have to pass the ball in the second half. If I'm wrong on a game script, I'm going to lose on this slate. It's one of those things, like I said earlier a couple times, you have to guess and kind of go with it. I'm okay fading Flowers, though. If I'm going to go with a Baltimore receiver, I think I'm just going to save money there. You got to figure that Snead plays on him a bunch. If not, McDuffie's there. Like Kansas City's so good against the pass that I just don't think if I'm going to spend on a Baltimore receiver, it's going to be a punt play for me. I'm just going to go down to, I don't know, Aguilar or OBJ or one of the tight ends. I think if I'm going to go Baltimore receiver, I'm just going to save the money and not pay up for Flowers.
Yeah, I'm with you. The argument for Zay is that he'll be pretty low owned.
I was going to say, probably, I imagine most people would just I'll just play Rice for a little bit more, or I'll go down. I imagine most people have that same. He's probably, yeah, you're right. He's probably a really low owned guy this week.
He's going to get lost. So I guess, that makes him more okay. We know he can break a long touchdown.
Yeah. On a 2-game slate, obviously everybody's in play. In a normal slate, that'd be just not even consideration at the price. But yeah, I mean, it's a 2-game slate. What about the cheap guys? We've mentioned Reynolds and Jameson Williams down here. Reynolds is 4,000, Jameson's 3,700, Aguilar's 3,800. We joke about McCole Hardman, but they gave him the ball at the 2-yard line. They threw him a deep ball in the first week of the playoffs. He's 3,000. Still explosive, could have big play, although I don't know how much they trust him right now. There's a lot of names down here, and finding the right one, is probably who's going to win some of these things. You're going to have to find the right one. Someone down here's going to hit a big play. If for some reason Debo doesn't play, I think Juwan Jennings at 4,600 becomes insanely popular really quickly. I think that he looked really good last week, had 6 targets. Brock clearly trusts him as if Debo's not there, I'll throw to Juwan. So 4,600 would be popular there for him. What are you doing with this low range this week?
Yeah, I don't see how the Chiefs can put Hardman out there after the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's
unbelievable,
really
especially last week. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not going to do it. If I was
By the
to
way,
punt the
and
Chiefs,
stop calling an end around to McLaurin on the 2-yard line. Like, what are like? You have so many weapons. Like, what are we? I know they love to get fancy,
yeah,
but
no, you're exactly right. What are you doing? Yeah, that's a good point. Such an important spot to go there. And you have Kelsey, Pacheco, Rice. Yeah, that's tough. But obviously we're going to play Jameson Williams again. He's going to be the most popular. But I do think the Lions are the best two options. Now Reynolds is more expensive, just a little bit, but I think we said it last week. We've kind of said it all season. Jameson has the upside and the ceiling, and yeah, just like him in the spot, especially if the Lions are playing catch up. Yeah, cheap Baltimore receiver. If you're going to play Lamar, I think Bateman or Aguilar are okay. Bateman played 65% of the snaps last week, 3 catches. And Aguilar played 50% of the snaps, way more than Odell. That was weird. The thing with Odell was weird because Harbaugh talked him up pre-game and saying how healthy he was, how good he's looked. It did seem like he ended up being kind of popular. You heard on a couple podcasts. Yeah, it's like people were on Odell last week, and now nobody's going to be on him at all. I'm not going to play him, but I don't know. Maybe it's something to consider.
Yeah, just the being on the field was the problem there. I mean, I just think that the targets you can kind of be like, as long as he's on the field, but he wasn't as much as the other two guys, and that obviously matters a lot there. If I'm Ben Johnson for the Lions, I'm in the first, I don't know, 20 minutes of the game, I'm taking 3 deep shots. Like I'm going, the Niners are going to be ramped up to stop the run. If you hit a couple runs, like I'm going play action. I'm going Williams and Reynolds over the top a couple times. Make Ambry Thomas not PI as somebody. Like I think he's going to be aware of that. He had the big PI last week, like a 40-yarder for, I forget who he tackled. I think it was Jaden Reed. I don't remember who it was, but if I'm then, like I'm taking a couple deep shots early. Like I'm making sure the Niners know that I'm not just running the ball. I think there's going to be a spot for Williams or Reynolds to make a big play. Who knows if they make it? You might get a PI. It doesn't help us. But if I'm them and Ben Johnson's way smarter in football than I am, I'm making sure the Niners know that there's a couple of I got some big play guys in here that even if they don't hit, I want them to be aware of that the rest of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think
I'm putting a scope on Ambry Thomas after last week, and I'm making a couple plays on him early, no matter what, to see where his mind and his everything else is at after that. And he was horrible last week.
Absolutely, and the Lions they've been smarter with their play calling, so I kind of expect them to do that. Yeah. You mentioned Juwan Jennings. Yeah, he'd be so popular if Debo ended up not playing. If Debo plays, you can't click him, right? Or I mean, like,
it's a 2-game slate in a tournament. Like we talked about the fact we're scared of playing Debo because he might get hurt. If you have a $4,600 Juwan Jennings in this offense with this total, in this weather, with this quarterback, with Ella's setup, and Debo plays 4 plays and can't go, you've got a guy that was going to be like over 50% owned if he was starting.
You've got the best play on the slate. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, and he's got a big frame. He's pretty good, actually.
He actually is good. Like he's I don't know if you saw the play that he blocked the guy and the Gatorade was on. Like they love Juwan Jennings, and he's really good. And another team, I think he's going to end up going somewhere else because he's not going to have balls in San Francisco. But another team, I think he'd be a good wide receiver too for a lot of teams.
Yeah, I agree. He passes the eye test every time I've seen him out there. Okay, that's interesting because,
and he's not the key. I think the key for me is at 4,600. I don't think he's dead even if Debo plays. Like I think his targets obviously go down.
I agree.
They use him in the red zone. They use him on third down a lot. They get a third down in the red zone. They look to him. Like Brock really likes him on third down. They call him Third and Juwan for a reason. Like it's not just out of nowhere. Like they use him on third down a bunch. So like he's cheap enough that even if Debo, I mean, you obviously play him. Your thought is like, maybe Debo gets hurt, and then I've got the best play on the slate. But I just don't. I think it works because even if Debo plays, I don't think Juwan's totally dead. He's probably 3-4 targets, but could score a touchdown. Could have 30-40 yards. So to keep like every once in a while we play guys like if someone gets hurt, this works out really well, but they're dead if he doesn't. I don't think Juwan's dead either way.
Yeah, I think you're right. I was trying to convince myself because, part of the reason he's not dead is because the whole range might bust. You might only need 10 points to outscore the entire range. You got Odell Beckham right there, and then Reynolds and the guys we mentioned. So, yeah, okay. I
think
agree.
I just talked myself into playing Jennings.
Yeah, I might. I've looked at a lot of lineup constructions where you need another guy in that range, and you just don't want to click on any of them. And if you're already playing Purdy, I don't know. It's a 2-game slate, so it kind of makes sense. I guess the last thing I wanted to say is, if I was going to play a Chiefs receiver, I almost don't even want to say it because I wouldn't click Hardman again. But MVS, he was out there for more snaps than Watson last week.
Yep.
Kind of expect him to be the number 2 receiver again. It only takes one,
I think not only you're right, but Mahomes had some statements after the game where he was very clear he was fired up that MVS made some big plays. I think he's cognizant of the fact that MVS has taken a lot of heat for drops and mistakes, but I think you're right. If I'm going to go second Chiefs receiver, for me, or MVS at 3,400 is the guy. I mean, because not only do you have the, anybody can be the third guy in that offense any week, but he can hit a big play at any point too. And one of these guys out here that hits 140-yard play for a touchdown, it's huge and it works. I agree with you. I think that if I'm going down here for a Chief, it's MVS too.
Yeah, he's got a lot of criticism and probably, rightfully so in a lot of spots, but he's popped up in the playoffs a couple times. I think he did last year, one game, and I know the year before, and yeah.
And I think maybe the Hardman distrust helps him too. I think that maybe we don't put Hardman out there in a big spot and make it MVS instead. So I think that matters too. Tight end is pretty stacked this week. For a week, we only have 2 games. We've got Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, and George Kittle. And that's before we get to the Baltimore guys. And Mark Andrews is a top 5 tight end when he's healthy. Crazy good tight end week for these 4 teams. Kelce on DraftKings at 6,600, Laporta 5,400, Kittle 53. Andrews is 5,000. Isaiah Likely is 4,300. We'll get to a couple punt plays at the end here real quick. But in terms of the non-punt guys, where do you find yourself leaning among these stud tight ends this week?
I kind of like all 3 of the top guys, so it's tough.
Hard not to,
Yeah, and Kittle and Laporta being the same price is tough as well. Because you can play either of them, you can play either tight end with Purdy, either Kittle or Laporta, so that makes it tough. Kelce, starting with Kelce kind of saved me last week. I ended up playing Kelce and not Rice, and he made up for some of the other mistakes I made. So I kind of have a good feeling about that. I know you said you preferred Rice, and I get that. I kind of prefer Kelce. I feel like when the playoffs come around, he just has maybe a little more touchdown upside. At least I like to think Mahomes sort of looks for him first in certain spots. I don't know. Just a story I'm telling myself.
Do we think Jason's going into Baltimore with his shirt off again this week?
Man, that was awesome. He should. It was
so funny because I saw him jump out of the suite. I'm like, oh, everybody's gonna love that. I'm like, oh crap, they're on the road. You gotta be careful jumping out in enemy territory. But I think everybody likes him and he was showing girls Taylor Swift and picking him up in the booth and everything. So I think that I think he's got enough people that really like him. He's fine. But I don't know if I'm gonna do that. I don't think I'm jumping out of the suite in Baltimore this week for the championship game. But I think I lean. If Debo plays, I think I lean Laporta at tight end. I think that just kind of one of those things you're guaranteed the targets with Laporta, whereas Kittle probably has to hit a big play to work, and he can. And we saw it last week, hit the big play, big touchdown, and Brock obviously loves throwing him. He's really good. I thought he was the best player on the 49ers offense last week. I know he had the drop pass late, which could have killed them, but he was really good. I mean, every time he touches the ball, it's 8 more yards on yards after catch. He's so important. But I just think that if Debo's healthy, there's so many options there that I think that makes me lean Laporta with the 11 targets last week. Narrow passing tree. They're going to have to throw the ball this week. I know that Fred and Dre Greenlaw cover tight ends really well, so it's not a great matchup. But a 2-game slate, anybody's playable, and I think that I go Laporta. If I got to make a decision, you have to. I'm going to go Laporta over Kittle this week.
Yeah, I think you broke it down perfectly. It's not a great matchup for any of them, right? For any of the tight ends, I mean. You could say, I agree, especially because Kittle's going to be more popular. So if Debo plays, I agree. I think you could see even Kittle considerably more popular than Laporta. So that's the way I'm leaning as well.
If you want to punt tight end, Zach Ertz down here. Brock Wright, the backup quarterback for Detroit, is out. Zach Ertz has been signed. He's 2,800. Noah Gray is 2,500. I guess those would be the punt ones. Are you thinking about punting here? It's kind of hard to do this week because there's so many. You're gonna get some tight end points this week, so you're not. It's not a week where you're like, there's nobody I really love, so I'll just punt it. I mean, there are 5 good ones. Can you get down here for a punt play in a lineup?
So I agree with you that it wouldn't make sense if you're just going to play one. I'm looking at maybe punting Noah Gray as a second tight end, just because going back to the receivers, there's going to be a lot of popular punt receivers. Then they're all around like 3,500 to 4K, and Noah Gray's all the way down to 2,500. So yeah, there's some constructions that I'm looking at where you need that extra 1,000. And even with like 4 or 5 points, like you can be okay, especially in single entry stuff. A couple weeks ago, my buddy won the big single entry on a Bills slate where he played Dawson Knox for, I think he was like 2,700 or 2,800. And Knox ended up catching a touchdown and scoring like 8 or 9 points or something, but he would have won if Knox scored 0. Just because like it was like just because you can get to constructions that people don't get to, and that's true on this slate too. So if I were to punt one of those guys, it would be as my second tight end.
It's a really good point because there's so many builds that are gonna be like, I'll just make sure that I get one of those mid-3 receivers, and you know hitting the right one's important, but you put that 2,500 in, you can just get. You're right, you can get to stuff that most people don't get to, and it's not really getting to all the better places. You're getting to different players. In a 2-game slate, you want to be somewhere different. And Noah Gray has 3, 4, and 3 targets the last 3 games of the regular season. I don't. What did he do last week? Did he do
60% of the 3?
Last
week. 3.
Yeah, he had 3 catches last week. You're right.
Yeah. Played 60% of the snaps. So like it seems okay.
Tied to it, one of the best quarterbacks in the history of football. It doesn't hurt either. Red zone thing. That's a really interesting setup because I think you're right. I think you just get to different things than people that are punting the receiver in the 3,500 to 4,000 range.
Yep, agreed.
I like it. Finally, before we jump out of here, we've talked about these games a bunch. You got to play a defense this week. I don't know. Good luck figuring this one out. Ravens are 3,200. Niners are 3,300. Chiefs are 2,900. Lions are 2,600. You can kind of they're all in the same range. You can kind of pick who you like best. I think if I had to pick one off the bat, it would probably be the 49ers. I think that the chances of any of these quarterbacks kind of having some moments here probably is highest with Goff outside. If the Niners get ahead, if they can make Detroit one-dimensional, that's their whole game plan this week, and they can start to rush him. I think he's the guy that can make some mistakes. We saw Purdy, in big games, has made some mistakes here. The Baltimore game last week, Cleveland, there was some weather involved in those, but the Baltimore game, he had 4 picks. I don't know if Detroit has quite the stud defense that was going to do that to him like these other ones do, but I'd probably go Niners. But Chiefs and Ravens, a lot of good players there, but you're facing MVP level quarterbacks. Niners are my favorite, but I'd be open to hearing who you like.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like I've been just agreeing with you pretty much all podcasts. So I kind of agree again here. I don't necessarily love any of these defenses, but the Ravens and the Chiefs are going to be the most popular. I think like way more popular than the Niners. I mean, people just look at it and that game has the lower total, and both those defenses are really good. The Chiefs offer some salary relief. I put a little note in the article that I think the Niners I could see the Niners coming in even less popular than the Lions. So like you could get a little leverage at defense. I agree in that, the second half of that game, if the Niners are defending the lead and you just have Chase Young and Bosa rushing all game, we've seen Goff throw plenty of interceptions before. He's going to take sacks too. So I like the Niners from a leverage point of view. But again, this is defense. If I need to go all the way down to the Lions, I'll do that too, because, we seen Purdy throw a couple picks recently, almost threw another pick 6 last week. So, I don't know. It's defense,
Yeah, there's been a couple plays with Brock. You're like, I think it's scouting too. I think that Green Bay really scouted that game well. I think they knew what was going on. I think that it helps that LaFleur and Shanahan run the same offense. I think LaFleur knows everything the Niners are going to do, but you could tell they were jumping on some reads there, and especially that one early that should have been a pick six. Like you could tell there was stuff going on there. I don't know if it'll be quite the same this week, but yeah, you can get down there. Brock can make a mistake.
I think it's it's 3 straight slates where the cheapest, lowest owned defense ended up the highest scoring with a pick six. So the Texans got a couple against Flacco, the Packers against Dak. Last week somebody again too. Yeah, but yeah, so it's defense. Obviously, there's tons of variance, but yeah, I agree. I kind of like the Niners for leverage.
Yeah, because the Texans had the punt return last week. Did they end up being okay even though they got killed?
I don't know about last week. No, 2 weeks ago was the Texans when they picked Flacco twice.
Yeah.
I don't remember what happened.
They did have a touchdown last week though.
You're right. Yeah, I don't remember how they finished up, but you're right. So yeah, we keep seeing these underdog defenses do it.
It just takes one play. The fact you mentioned the Niners would be that low owned makes me like them more because I think that, like you said, I don't love any of these defenses, but that's the one that, like, if it goes as game script, I think Goff's going to make some mistakes in the third and fourth quarter. I hope so at least. But if Detroit runs the ball and they get up, then the Niners defense is dead from a fantasy perspective. Like, it is, someone running the ball over and over against your defense is the dead worst. That you don't want that. But you got to figure out game script here. So. Anything else you want to talk about? I feel like we've beaten these games pretty good here. Anything else on your mind on this one? It sounds to me like you're picking Ravens 49ers Super Bowl. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, you're reading that right. No, nothing else on my mind. I think we covered about as much as we could cover.
Yeah, I think so too. It should be really fun. These are really, really good games. These are interesting games. They're fun games. Nobody snuck through that makes these games not as exciting. So it's should be really fun. I think we thought we'd see Niners Cowboys and Niners Eagles, but I think Niners Lions has a lot of storylines. I think that there's a couple maps on Twitter of like everybody in the country except for California rooting for the Lions this week. So it's going to be pretty popular. I hear a lot of Lions fans are going to the game. It's a lot of more Lions than the Packers fans. Surprising. Usually Packers travel really well. There weren't a ton of Packers fans. Very the Lions fans are spending a lot of money. Tickets are really expensive this week because the Lions fans kind of boosted that up. So. They haven't been here in a long, long time, so it should be fun, should be good. Ryan, I'll be back at you for the Super Bowl, I believe. We're going to do a DFS show, maybe throw some bets or something in there, some props. We'll figure it out. But I want to thank everybody for listening today and all season long. We'll be back at you for one more show at the Super Bowl. Hope everybody has a really good week and enjoy the game.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Good luck, everybody.